Hello there. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I want to look at a question paper of November 2024. So this is an economics paper one from the province of Eastern Cape. So with that, we move on to the instructions and information. So we are only going to look at instruction one, whereby we are given that the question paper here's section A, section B, and section C. Of course, section A is compulsory. Looking at section B, you have to answer two of the three questions that are given. Then section C, obviously, this one is a part you have to answer one of the two questions that are there. So I'll take note of that. Further instructions we are given that you can always also go through. So with that now, we can move on to the first part of our question, which is going to be our section A. Remember, our section A is compulsory. So our section A consists of 30 marks. And obviously, you have to spend on average 20 minutes on this section. So first question that we have is natural resources that can be replaced over time are known as so it's that if they can be replaced over time, it means they can be replenished. So in that case, they become renewable. So we have renewable on D. Remember, whenever a resource is renewable, it is a natural resource that can be replenished naturally over time. Therefore, it can be used continuously without permanent depletion. So there is no permanent depletion in terms of a renewable resource. So this is what we have. So we move on to number two. Goods that are designed to last for a long period of time are. We know that goods that last for the longest time are the durable goods. So we have got durable on B. So if you go on number three, an economic system where resources are allocated based on market forces is a. We know that this is a market economy. We have got the free floating and then the free floating of the forces of demand and supply. So in that case, we don't have a visible hand that controls market operations. So we call that a market economy. So we have A as the correct response. Then number four, the industries that operate in the tertiary sector include. So we know that the tertiary sector, it provides services rather than producing tangible goods. So the tertiary sector also, we can call it the service sector. It also means the same thing. So with now what we are given there, you see that the transport and communication is the most appropriate, which you have C, representing the tertiary sector. So we have C. So number five, a tax system in which the tax rate increases as the taxpayer's income increases is known as a progressive tax system. So we've got progressive, A. So this is what we have for this part. We'll move on to the next question, which is going to be number six. The number of children are born alive each year per thousand of the population is known as the death rate. So remember, this is the crude birth rate. So we have got crude birth rates on B. Remember, the crude births are basically looking at crude birth. We are looking at the number of live births in a population over a specific period, usually a year per 1,000 people. So this is what we have in terms of um, crude death, crude birth. So we can just correct. We are talking about the crude birth, which is on C. So this is what we have. Then number seven, the rate at which the central bank lends money to the commercial bank is the repo rate, which you have on B. So our number eight, the dash represents the cost of a typical shopping basket of goods and services over an average South African household. So of course we're given the Gini index and the CPIX, the producer price index, and the consumer price index. So the correct one is the consumer price index. And remember, when you're looking at the consumer price index, it is a measure of the average change over time in the price paid by consumers for a market basket of consumer goods and services, such as, for example, food, housing, also transportation can also be part of that basket. So this is the explanation that we have on number 8. And remember, this is the last question that we have on the multiple choice section with a total of 16 marks. So with that, we move on to the next section that we have, which is now on 1.2. Choose a description for in column B that matches an item in column A. So the first term that we have is labor. The first term that we have is labor. So we know that labor is human effort. So we check in terms of column B what matches labor. So we try to see according to our responses. Of course, our responses are going down. But if code I is the most appropriate, use of mental and physical effort to produce goods and services, which is the human effort. So we have got I as the correct response. Then open economy, we know that an open economy is an economy that operates without it operates interacting with other economies. So we check now according to our responses to see where we have. So if you go to D, where goods and services are traded with other countries. So that's the correct response. So you put D. Nationalization. Nationalization, we know that this is a transfer of ownership from private ownership to state ownership. So which within the context of that and do explains that. So we do go to our column B and C. Of course, we've got further responses that we can refer to. So if you go to G, occurs when the state takes over ownership of businesses from the private sector. So that is what we have. So G is the correct answer. Then looking at market failure, we know that market failure, it is an economic situation where a free market supply and demand forces fail to allocate goods and services efficiently. So in this case, the quantity supply does not equal the quantity demand. And that's the scenario that we have under the market failure. So within that context, again, we do see what to match is that if you see B, okay, when the scarce resources are wasted due to incorrect production decisions. So when we have got these scarce resources, they are going to lead to less supply, which is not going to meet the demand. So market failure is created. So we have B. Then productivity, we know that this is the relationship that exists between the input and the output. So we have a productivity. So if you check according to our responses, we see that the correct one is A, the value of output obtained with 1 unit of input. So we have A. Then on the next part, we've got the Human Development Index. So the Human Development Index basically is a composite statistic that measures average achievements in a country's 3 basic dimensions of human development, which constitutes a long, healthy life, access to knowledge, and also a decent standard of living. So within that context, we also check which one matches that. So if you go to E, summary, composite measure of a country's average achievements of health, knowledge, and standard of living. So we have E. Then inflation is described as the general rise in prices. When prices increase, we describe that as inflation. So within that context, we check again which explanation do matches that. So you go to C, general increase in prices. So we have that as explained, general increase in prices and fall in the purchasing power. So we see that there is a relationship that exists between the increase in prices and the value of the currency. So with that, we have a C. Then infrastructure, we have H there, describing the basic facilities, services, and installations needed for the functioning of an economy. So we have H as the most appropriate, that is really explaining infrastructure. So we have H. So basically, this is the last part that we have in terms of our 1.2. So we move on to the next part now, which is going to be our 1.3. So 1.3, we give one term or word for each of the following descriptions. Write only the term or word next to the question numbers. That's 1.3.1 to 1.3.6 in the answer book. So abbreviations, acronyms, and examples will not be accepted. So on the first part, when capital stock grows at the same rate as the labor force. So what do we call that? So with that, we see that this is capital widening. Capital widening, as stated, we have got capital widening. That's what we have on that part. Then the goods that are scarce and that people are willing to pay for, we call those economic goods. So we also have economic goods. We go to the next part. A measure of the income earned by citizens or permanent residents of a country, irrespective of where it is earned. So we call that the gross national income. Gross national income, as opposed to gross domestic income, which is the gross domestic product. We are looking at those that are being earned within the national boundaries inside the local economy. So basically, that's the difference. So on that part, we have got the gross national income, which we have here as the gross national income. So we move on to the next part. A salary or wage that households receive for labor services, and this is basically income. We can call that income. And then we move on to the next one. Generally accepted as a means of payment as it serves as a medium of exchange. Remember, medium of exchange represents the characteristic of money. So we have money on 5. Then on the next part, which is now 1.3.6, development that will meet a nation's current needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So this is the sustainable development. So we do have sustainable development on 6. So with that, and that marks the end of our section A. This is the end of our section A, and you see that section A has got a total of 30 marks. So we move on to the next question, which is now going to be our question 2, which is on section B. So section B, question 2, macroeconomics, it has got 40 marks. You should spend on average 30 minutes. So answer the following questions at 2.1.1. Name any 2 factors influencing the price of natural resources. Name any 2 factors influencing the price of natural resources. We see that we can include various factors, which is obviously climate. When we have got a harsh climate that is going to make the natural resources to be lessened, we're also going to see that when the supply is less, the price will go up. So basically, that's the scenario that we have in terms of factors influencing the price of natural resources. Other factors that we can include is quality of the resources, technology, supply and demand is also part of that. So we check in terms of our answer section, whereby we have those as mentioned. So of course, we do have supply and demand, climate, location, quality or resources, technology. So that's what we have on that part. Then, of course, on the next question that we have, how can the South African government use its procurement system to uplift economically marginalized groups? So economically marginalized groups, obviously, those are the disadvantaged groups. So how can they use that? So within that context, I would see that the government can improve the access of economically marginalized groups by ensuring compliance with the broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Act, and also setting aside contracts for small, medium, and micro enterprises, including those belonging to historically disadvantaged individuals, reserving contracts for historically disadvantaged individuals. And also you can look at channeling funds to businesses belonging to previously disadvantaged groups. So basically, this is what we have on this part. Then in terms of the next question that we have now 2.2. Start the extract below and answer the questions that follow. We are given an extract of factors of production, whereby we see that we have got pictures that we have. Of course, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. and we beneath or below this picture 2.2.1, identify the factor of production labeled 3 from the picture above. You can see that 3 is not labeled, but we see that in 3, we are supposed to identify factor of production. Remember, all factors of production, we've got land labor, um, capital, and entrepreneurship. So within that context, we are seeing that we are seeing machinery, equipment that we are seeing there. We are seeing a vehicle, which is a part of capital as a factor of production. So you see that 3 is representing capital. So basically, this is what we have on that part. So with that now, we move on to the next question, which is now going to be 2.2.2. So on 2.2.2, you have to name one factor that influences the quality of workforce or labor. So the quality of workforce or labor obviously is a worker who has high productivity, working positively, obviously, in the business. So the skills that the worker possesses is going to determine the quality of that worker. So the skills, we talk also about the education, that does the worker has education, which is something that is going to work positively. The health status also, a good health status obviously is constitutes a better quality of a worker. The experience that the worker has also can also describe the quality. So those are some of the factors that we take into account. So we try to check in terms of the list that we have. So we have education or skills training, we have healthcare, we have experience. So the next question, you have to briefly describe the term economic rent. So economic rent is an earned extra income for which the resource owner, he has done nothing, an excess payment or an excess payment made to or for effect of production over and above the amount expected by its owner. So description of economic rent. So moving on to the next question that we have. Explain the role played by entrepreneurs in the economy. So what is the role that is played by entrepreneurs in the economy? Remember, entrepreneurs those are the um, individuals that are operating their own business, that have taken an initiative to start their own businesses. So what is the role that they play? Obviously, they're going to reduce unemployment. As they open businesses, they're going to create employment and they reduce unemployment. That's a role that is being played by those entrepreneurs. Also, from that angle, also we can also see that entrepreneurs promote also the issue of competition in the economy. Competition obviously is a positive move. Whenever there's competition, we are going to see that those that are producing goods they're going to produce quality goods as they try to win customers. So that's a positive that we are going to see. Also, an increase in the gross domestic product. Economic activity is going to be increased as more businesses open and more business operate. So basically, from that point, you can see the positive roles that we can deduce from entrepreneurs. So with that, let's see what we have in terms of our answer section. So these are the roles played by entrepreneurs in the economy. Entrepreneurs play a key role in shaping the economy by starting new firms or businesses. The creation of new businesses can contribute to the development of a more diverse and dynamic economy. Entrepreneurs promote innovation and competition, leading to new improved goods and services that contribute to economic growth and development. So provide access to goods and services and improve the overall standard of living. So basically, these are the roles that we have within the context of our 2.4. So with that, I will move on to the next question. How can capital formation contribute more positively to the economy? So we are going to see that capital formation, it is the process of increasing the society's stock of capital, which includes physical assets like machinery, and factories also are part of capital formation, as well as intangibles such as patents. So basically, it involves setting aside a portion of a country's output for future production, and it occurs in three stages. You'll see that you can see the first stage is saving money, and also secondly, mobilizing those savings, and thirdly, investing the money in productive assets. So that is a capital formation. So the question requires us is saying how can capital formation contribute more positively to the economy. So with that, we can check in terms of the points that we have. So within that context, the accumulation of capital goods translates to investment in production of goods and services, which should boost the income of the population and stimulate demand. When the stock capital in a country grows at a rate that is greater than the growth rate of the labor force, it will lead to an increase in the real GDP. Also, new capital goods can improve efficiency and productivity, leading to higher output and better quality products. So this is what we have on that part. So moving on to the next part, which is now 2.3. 2.3 is start the information below and answer the questions that follow. Of course, we are given government expenditure, consolidated government expenditure 2022 to 2023, year 2, 2024 to 2025. So this is the information that we are given. Then beneath that information, the question says identify the classification of capital consumption expenditure by government in the graph above. So you'd see that the question requires us identify the classification of the final consumption expenditure. The classification of the final consumption expenditure by government in the graph above. So you'd see that this is a functional classification in terms of the functions that we have. So it's functional classification. So we are saying functional classification. So we move on to 2.3.2, name and two examples of social services. So social services, we can talk about education, it's a social service. We can talk about recreation, culture, and religion. It's part of social service. Public order and safety, it's also a social service. So at least in terms of that, of social service, you see that this is what we have, whereby we've got environmental protection, housing and community amenities, health, education, recreation, culture, and religion. So social protection, also you've got public order and safety. So these are the questions that we have. So on the next question, it reads, briefly describe the term injection. So injection basically is an addition. It's an addition in the circular flow. So it's the introduction of income into the circular flow, such as investment, government expenditure, and export income. So it is that investment, government expenditure, and export income, they add to the circular flow. Then 2.3.4 is why are imports not included in domestic expenditure? Because imports do not form part of domestic production. Also, imports are produced in the rest of the world. So they are not included in domestic expenditure. Then 2.3.5, analyze the importance of government expenditure in the economy. Government expenditure, we know that this is an instrument that is used by the government in the fiscal policy. We are talking about the issue of grants fall under government expenditure. The issue of subsidies fall under government expenditure. So even the other expenditures that are done by the government fall also under government expenditure. For instance, infrastructural development is also part of government expenditure. So you see that government expenditure is extensive. So we look now at the question saying analyze the importance of government expenditure in the economy. Government expenditure helps to stabilize the economy during times of recession or depression by increasing aggregate demand, also as our first point. Then on the second point, government investment in infrastructure, education can boost the economic growth and development. On the third point, government expenditure can create jobs directly, for example, in the public sector and indirectly through infrastructure projects. So these are some of the points that we can include. Of course, the question requires us to raise 2 points. So this is what we have on this part. So moving on to 2.4, explain the role or importance of the national income aggregates. So the national account aggregates are useful for indicating the economic activity within the country, measuring economic growth from one year to the next, determining the standard of living in a country, comparing prosperity levels among countries, provide valuable insights for businesses, helping them make informed decisions. So uh, points that we can include. So 2.5, evaluate the possible causes for the ongoing energy crisis in South Africa. What may be the causes? Aging infrastructure of much of nations' electricity generation infrastructure need to be replaced. This can be a cause of that ongoing crisis. Also, ESCOM's track record of building new generation capacity since the crisis began in 2007 has not been good. Poor performance of ESCOM's core fleet. None of the core plants in ESCOM's fleet are operating at full capacity. So further points we also have in terms of that. So this marks at the end of our question 2, and of course, we move on to the next question. Moving on to our question 3, which is on economic pursuits. Of course, with 40 marks, requires us to spend on average 30 minutes. So the first question is name two functions of the South African Reserve Bank. And we know that the South African Reserve Bank, which is the SARB, is the banker to all banks. It means all other commercial banks has got an account at the South African Reserve Bank, which is the central bank of the country. So also you see that the government also has got an account at South African Reserve Bank as the central bank. So those are some of the functions that you can include in terms of the South African Reserve Bank. So we are saying a banker to commercial banks, a banker to the government, a custodian of gold and foreign exchange reserves, provides economic and statistical services. So those are the functions that we have. Then on the next question, why is wealth more important than income? So you'd see that wealth is more important than income as it provides safety. Wealth provides safety, so that's why it is more important. So within that context, we are saying wealth is more important as it provides the safety net and financial stability, and wealth can grow over time through smart investments, generating more income and increasing one's net worth, where income allows people to satisfy their needs and pursue many other goals that they deem important to their lives. So with that, we move on to the next question, which is now 3.2. Start the information below and answer the questions that follow. Of course, we are given information of countries with the biggest inequality in income distribution worldwide in 2023 based on the Gini coefficient. So we've got countries, column for countries, column for Gini coefficient. Then, according to the World Bank, South Africa is the most economically unequal country in the world with a Gini coefficient of 0.63. Higher unemployment is a major factor behind the inequality levels. So 3.2.1 identify a reason for the higher Gini coefficient in South Africa from the information above. So we also need to understand what do we mean by a Gini coefficient. So basically, when we are looking at a Gini coefficient, it is a statistical measure of the degree of variation represented in a set of values used especially in analyzing income inequality. So that is a Gini coefficient. So the question requires us to identify a reason for the higher Gini coefficient in South Africa. So you would see that in terms of that, it is higher unemployment. That's why we are having a higher Gini coefficient. Higher unemployment is the reason. So go to 3.2.2, indicate what a Gini coefficient of 1 means. A Gini coefficient of 1, it means a country's income distribution is equal. We have got income distribution which is equal. Then we have got a Gini coefficient which is 1. Then moving on to the next person, describe the term income distribution. So income distribution, basically, we can define it, or it describes how a country's total income is shared among its population, showing the allocation of income across different individuals or households. So basically, you see that it is actually a measure of income inequality. Income inequality within a society, often analyzed using tools like Lorentz curve. We can also use the Gini coefficient. So that is income distribution. So the brief description that we have of income distribution within the context of this video, we are saying income distribution refers to the way in which income is allocated or distributed among individuals or groups within a population or economy. So that's the brief description that we can give. The next question, you have to explain the use of the Gini coefficient to measure income inequalities. So this is the response. A lower Gini coefficient closer to zero indicates that a country's income distribution is almost equal. And then on the next point, a Gini coefficient of zero represents a situation where everyone has the same income, while a coefficient of one represents a situation where one person holds all the income. So basically, that's what we have in terms of the deduction that we have of the Gini coefficient. Then the Gini coefficient can vary from zero, perfect equality, to one, perfect inequality. So basically, this is what we have on that part. So going back to 3.2.2, whereby they're saying indicate what a Gini coefficient of 1 means. So the explanation that we have here is wrong. It's saying it means that the country's income distribution is equal, which is not correct. So what it means when we have a Gini coefficient of 1, it represents perfect income or wealth inequality, where one individual possesses all the income and everyone else has nothing. So that's the representation of a Gini coefficient of 1. So we can correct that. So with that, we move on to the next part that we have. That is going to be our 3.2.5. Examine the impact of income inequality in the South African economy. That's our 3.2.5. On 3.2.5, it reads examine the impact of income inequality on the South African economy. So you'd say that the income inequality can lead to increased poverty, homelessness, and income insecurity. Income inequality can fuel feelings of frustration, resentment, social unrest, and political instability. We also have further points that we have that are also correct. So moving on to our 3.3, we have to start the information below and answer the questions that follow. We are given information of bank failure and their consequences. So of course, we have got information that you also need to read. So first question, identify a reason for bank failures from the information above. So we refer back to the information and try to come up with reasons of bank failures. So it is shown here where we have rising interest rates, also falling commercial real estate values. Also, these 2 points are the points that we can refer to indicate a reason for bank failures from the information that we are given. So next question, name the consequence of bank failures. What are the consequences that we can deduce whenever there are bank failures? So with that, you'd see that there will be a banking panic can be a consequence whereby you see panic prevailing. Also, you have to, unemployment also can be a consequence that we can also include. So these are the consequences, whereby lack of confidence in the banking sector, depositors may lose their deposits, banking panic, banking run, negative perception, unemployment also. So that is what we have on that part. Then we move on to the next question. briefly describe the term bank failure. So the description of bank failure. Bank failure occurs when a bank is unable to meet its obligations to its depositors or other creditors because it has become insolvent or too liquid to meet its liabilities. So that is what we call bank failure. Then explain the basic principles of credit creation by banks. Basic principles of credit creation are by banks. Credit creation refers to the loans that banks make available. The banks sell money through granting loans. Banks are financial institutions that serve as links between people who make deposits and people who acquire loans. So that's what we. Then we also 3.3.5 explain the relationship between bank failure and economic activities. So this is the relationship that is there. Then on the next part, which is now our 3.4, differentiate between economic growth and economic development. But basically, economic growth is a quantity measure whereby we are measuring the total number of goods that are being produced. And when these goods that are being produced increase from one period to the other, there is economic growth. But economic development goes on and cascades to measure the quality of life of the people that are there in that economy, standard of living. So we have that as the main difference. So economic growth, it is an increase in the productive capacity of the economy, whereby economic development is an increase in the standard of living of people in a country. Then we see that economic growth also is measured as a percentage change in real GDP, whereby economic development deals with issues such as education, literacy, healthcare, employment, and environmental sustainability. So that's what we have on that part. So moving on to the next question. Examine the monetary policy by focusing on the instruments used by the South African Reserve Bank. We know that the monetary policy is set by the central bank of the country. So the South African Reserve Bank is the central bank of South Africa, the one that is in charge of setting the interest rates. So these are the instruments that are used in setting the monetary policy. We've got interest rates. We have the cash reserve requirements. We also have open market transactions. Moral suasion is also part of that. So basically, this is what we have, and this becomes the last part that we have. In terms of question 3, and of course, we move on to the next question. Question 4 is on macroeconomics and economic pursuits, offers with 40 marks. It requires you to spend 30 minutes. So first question, name in two forms of energy infrastructure. So you can include hydroelectric plants. You can even include burning of wood is part of that. So those we've got a list that we have, which is electricity, nuclear power, hydroelectric plants, burning of oil and gas, burning of food. So these are the points that we have. So on the next question, it reads, on the next question, it reads, how do local people benefit from indigenous knowledge? So of course, we do want also to understand what we mean by indigenous knowledge. So basically, indigenous knowledge is knowledge or beliefs are developed by local communities. That is indigenous knowledge. So how do local people benefit from indigenous knowledge? You would see that the points that we have is that indigenous knowledge help local people cope with periodic food shortages by utilizing the traditional know-how of preserving food. That is the first point that we have. And also, uh, indigenous knowledge helps preserve cultural heritage and traditional practices and promoting cultural identity and community cohesion. Indigenous knowledge encompasses traditional healing practices, medicines, and health remedies which can complement a modern healthcare. So these are the points that we can include within the context of our question 4.1.2. So moving on to the next question that we have, we now on data response, start the information below and other questions that follow. Of course, we are given information of 6 of the 10 industries reported a rise in economic activity in Q2 2023. So information we have, and of course, the first question beneath reads identify an industry with the lowest contribution in the graph above. So we need to refer back to the graph and see which industry you've got at the lowest contribution. So if you go back, you'd see that you see the one with the least percentage. And the least percentage, we are seeing that it's negative 1.9. That's at the least. Negative 1.9 on this part. Which is transport, storage, and communication. So that's our answer. The next question, I name one operation in the primary industry, in the primary sector. One operation in the primary sector. Obviously, operation that we can see in the primary sector is agriculture. Forestry is also part of that. Fishing also part of that. So those are the operations in the primary sector. And then if we go back again, the next question, briefly describe the term industry. So industry basically it refers to all the business enterprises that produce a similar type of good or a service. It's an industry. So definition of any industry, we have an industry refers to all the businesses enterprises that produce a similar type of good or service. So that is the description of an industry. So on the next question, you have to explain the importance of the secondary sector in the economy. So we know that the secondary sector is the one that converts raw materials into finished goods. So manufacturing takes place in the secondary sector. So what is the importance of that sector? So you'd see that the importance of the sector is on the production of goods, obviously, and also it is labor intensive. We are going to see that it accommodates more workers than any sector in the economy. So it reduces unemployment, which is also an importance that we can quickly deduce. So within that context, you'd see that the importance of secondary sector in the economy. The first one is that the secondary sector is labor intensive, which helps the economy to create many job opportunities and reduce unemployment. It helps to process raw materials into finished goods that can be exported at a higher price and generate more income for the economy. So that is what we put. Also further points that are also correct. So on the next question, 4.2.5, how will an improved infrastructure contribute to an increase in quality of life? Obviously, positives that we can deduce from improved infrastructure. Transport services are going to be more enhanced. So transporting goods and services and enabling people to access work, schools, and educational activities, which play an important role in the economy. So that is the first part. If efficiently moving goods and services across borders, that is exports and imports, connecting households across our metropolitan areas to higher quality opportunities for employment, stimulating economic growth, especially in rural areas, or by contributing to the gross domestic product of the country. So that is what we have on that part. Then making it possible for people to do business from anywhere in the world through improved commutation or technology. So further points we also have pertaining that. So this is what we, but of course the question only requires you to come up with two points. So 4.3 on data response, study the article below and answer the questions that follow. So you're given S8 redistribution method. So you have to go through information given. Then 4.3.1, identify South Africa's redistribution method mentioned in the article above. So you'd see that we have got affirmative action as the redistribution method that has been mentioned. So affirmative action, remember, it's a set of procedures designed to eliminate unlawful discrimination among people, So they remedied the results of such prior discrimination and prevent such discrimination in the future. So the discrimination has to be prevented in the future through affirmative action. So with that, we move on to 4.3.2. Name the type of tax levied on the profit gained when selling off capital goods. So it is the capital gains tax. Capital gains tax is indicated. The next question, briefly describe the term fiscal policy. We know that fiscal policy is a policy that is set by the government, that is clear, and it used two main instruments. That is, it used taxation as an instrument and government expenditure as an instrument. So those are the two main instruments that are used under fiscal policy to control economic activities. So the description that we have here is that it refers to the use of government spending and taxation to influence the overall level of economic activity. So that's what we have. Then 4.3.4 explain the difference between land redistribution and land restitution. So we have those as explained, where the difference is articulated. Then 4.3.5, how can a minimum wage benefit the economy? We know that a minimum wage is a wage that is set above the equilibrium wage rate. So helps to reduce poverty and income inequality within a society. So basically, we are increasing at the wage rate when we have a minimum wage. So it's obviously going to reduce poverty and income inequality. So with a higher minimum wage, workers have more disposable income to spend on goods and services, boosting economic activities. So that's what we have on minimum wage. Then next question, differentiate between final goods and intermediate goods. Intermediate goods. Final goods that are intended for direct consumption or use by the end user, meet the final demand of consumers. Examples, we've got food, clothing, cars, smartphones, TVs, etc. Whereby intermediate goods now are goods that are used as inputs in the production process to create final goods. So they are not intended for direct consumption. So this is what we have in terms of the differentiation between final goods and intermediate goods. So as a continuation, we have 4.5. Why is it necessary to regulate micro lenders? We know that micro lenders are lenders that give small loans. So or that issue small loans. So it is necessary to regulate micro lenders to protect borrowers by ensuring that micro lenders operate transparently and fairly, preventing exorbitant interest rates, hidden fees, and deceptive marketing. So we know that micro lenders also are associated or are characterized by high interest rates. So that's the scenario that we have. Then also promote responsible lending practices, such as assessing the borrower's creditworthiness and ability to repay. Help prevent borrowers from taking on too much debt, reducing the risk of default. So these are some of the points that we can have, and we see that this is our question 4.5. So with that, this is what we have. So we can try to see in terms of the points that we have. So I'm moving on to our question 5. Remember, our question 5 is on it's a part whereby it's on macroeconomics. So having also 40 marks requires us to spend on average 40 minutes. So first part of our essay, compare and contrast the South African mixed economy with a centrally planned economic system. Then on the second part, we evaluate the government's efficiency in the delivery of social services to local communities. Of course, this is the additional part. So of course, this is an essay question. We are supposed to come up with our introduction as required. So in terms of how we are supposed to come up with our introduction, these are the requirements. A good starting point would be to define a concept or keyword that appears in the question, or you have to include other sentences to support the topic. Do not include in your introduction any part of the question. Do not repeat any part of the introduction in the body. Avoid saying in the introduction what you are going to discuss in the body. So these are the uh, requirements or what we are supposed to follow in terms of our introduction. Then, of course, the typical introduction that we can come up with according to our question 5, we have a typical introduction that we have on this part, whereby it's a description of a mixed economic system. Remember, introduction, you can also define any key term that is in the question. So in this case, we have got a mixed economic system that has been defined in the introduction. Then with that, we are now going to go to the main part. The main part now is saying compare and contrast the South African mixed economy with a centralized applied economic system. But we know that a mixed economy is an economic system whereby we are having a free market economy, and also the central planned economic system is also there. So it's a mixture of two economic systems. That is a mixed economy. Then when we are looking now at a centralized centrally planned economy, it is also known as a command economy, and it is an economic system where the federal government, the authority, makes all major economic decisions regarding the production, distribution, and the pricing of goods and services. So the government is the owner of the resources in that economy. So with that now, we are having a light in terms of what we mean by centralized economic system, but also we also have the free market economy, which is inside the mixed economy. So free market economy, we do not have government ownership of resources. So decisions are being made by private individuals. So typically, this is what we have. So now, when it's a mixed, we have both those characteristics coming in. But centralized, we are only looking at ownership being the government making decisions on the allocation of resources. So basically, that's what we have. So now going to our requirements of the first point, whereby we have to compare the contract South African mixed economy and a centralized planned economic system. We have a comparison here articulated whereby we have got the mixed economy section and the central planned section. So in terms of ownership, we have got a differentiation between the two, and also we've got a differentiation in terms of motivation. Uh, Motivation, we also have a plan, business fluctuations. So the differentiations are there, are being highlighted. We also have competition, how competition is being differentiated between the two. We also have business fluctuations with differentiation also coming in, planning as the same. So we go forward in terms of how these differentiations are coming in. We also have full employment. We also have a distribution of income, mass production, choices, economic growth, economic decisions, market and prices. So this is what we have on that part. And then, of course, we do continue where we have now the additional part. So this is our additional part, whereby we have to evaluate the government efficiency in the delivery of social services to local communities. So positives of the government efficiency in the delivery of social services to local communities. Firstly, we've got positive, whereby South Africa is a comprehensive social welfare policy framework, including the National Development Plan and Social Development Sector Plan. Social services such as grants, healthcare, and education are widely available, covering a significant portion of the population. So, further points we have under the positives. And of course, we also have the negative part. The continuation of the negative part. So, as I say, obviously, we are going to end with our conclusion. So moving on to essay number 2, that is question 6 on economic pursuits. First part you have to discuss in detail the characteristics of developing countries. Then additional part, which is at the second point, How can human and natural resources be used to ensure economic development? So typically, we are supposed to start with our introduction. So this is a typical introduction that we can have. So we have got a description of a developing country. A developing country is a sovereign state with a less developed industrial base and lower human development index related to other countries. So developed country, we know that it's associated with poor citizens. See that it's also characterized with high birth rates, high death rates, a characterization of a developing country, low standards of living, low industrialization, low economic activity, low GDP. Those are some of the characteristics that we can quickly pick in terms of a developing country. So, in terms of now the main part, we see that it's saying discuss in detail the characteristics of a developing country. So, those are the characteristics that are coming in: low standard of living, and the explanation of low standard of living. We also have low levels of productivity. Then from low levels of productivity, we also have high population growth and dependence burdens. That's characteristics of developing countries. So we only see that we've got also high levels of unemployment, high also dependence on the primary sector. That's a very common in developing countries, that they depend on primary sector because they are not industrialized. So they depend on the primary sector. We also have deficiency of infrastructure. That's another characteristic of a developing country. Then on the additional parts, how can human and natural resources be used to ensure economic development? So basically, that's what we have on that part. So in response to that, these are the points that we have on the additional parts. So we also have a conclusion. We are supposed to come with a conclusion. This is a typical conclusion that you can come up with according to our essay.